That evening, out of curiosity, George posted a photo of the dime in a local coin enthusiast forum he occasionally visited. Most people dismissed it as a common Roosevelt dime, minted in the hundreds of millions that year. But one user, a specialist in minting errors and anomalies, sent him a private message. "Hey George," the message read, "can you take a better photo of that 1984 D dime? Especially the obverse and reverse close-ups? I think you might have something special." Intrigued, George fetched his magnifying glass and inspected the coin again. He began to notice details he had previously overlooked. There was slight doubling in the word liberty, and Roosevelt's I seemed unusually pronounced. The surface was remarkably clean, with only minimal bag marks. And more oddly, the edge of the coin appeared more polished than usual, as if it had been struck with extra force or on an unusual planchet. He uploaded the requested photos, and within hours, the collector replied again. "You may have stumbled across a rare 1984 D. Roosevelt dime struck with an improperly prepared die. I've only seen 3 like this in my 20 years of collecting." The man explained that there were rumors in the numismatic community about a very limited batch of 1984 D dimes being struck on misaligned or polished dies, possibly even on experimental planchets not meant for public circulation. George was stunned. All his life, he had kept coins for fun, never expecting they might actually be valuable. He was advised to send the dime to a professional grading company to verify the coin's authenticity and potential rarity. Weeks passed before the verdict arrived. The coin had been graded MS-67 with full torch bands. But even more surprising, it had a rare surface polish and strong strike pattern suggesting it may have been struck as a test or during the early stages of die cycle, a so-called first strike that mints often use for testing clarity and sharpness. It was a textbook example of a rare Denver mint anomaly. Experts suggested it may have been one of a small handful that escaped from a test batch meant to stay within the mint walls. Word spread quickly. George began receiving emails from collectors around the country. Some offered to buy it outright. Others wanted to trade. A major auction house reached out and offered to place it as the headline item in an upcoming rare coin event. George agreed, more out of curiosity than desperation. He wanted to see what people would truly pay for a dime that, not long ago, had almost been rolled up with others and deposited at the bank. At the auction, under bright lights and curious eyes, the coin was introduced with a detailed description, including its MS-67 grade, the strong reverse bands, the visible doubling, and the die strike characteristics that set it apart from the typical Denver mint dimes. The bidding began modestly, but soon escalated as a few eager collectors recognized the uniqueness of the piece. When the final hammer fell, George's 1984 D-dime had fetched over $65,000. He sat in stunned silence. That little coin, pulled from a change drawer on a lazy afternoon, had just changed his financial life in a single stroke. But the real joy, for George, wasn't the money. It was the story, the excitement, the strange twist of fate that turned a common moment into an extraordinary one that for collectors, the Roosevelt dime is often overlooked. Introduced in 1946 to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the coin replaced the Mercury dime and has remained unchanged in design for decades. Minted in massive quantities, most Roosevelt dimes are seen as common, everyday currency. But as with many coins, the real value lies not in the design, but in the anomalies, the mistakes, the unexpected missteps during the minting process that accidentally create treasures. In the case of the 1984 D-dime, several rare errors have been reported over the years. Dimes struck on improper planchets, double dies, and first strike anomalies. Some feature weak reverse designs. Others possess highly unusual metallic sheens, likely caused by experimental surface treatments or planchet preparation issues. But only a very small number have ever been verified and graded at high mint state levels. These coins, when authenticated, can demand serious attention and serious money. They're not just coins, they're minting artifacts. They represent the unseen hand of chance at the very heart of America's coin production system. So what can we learn from George and his unexpected discovery? That even in the most familiar places, in your desk drawer, your wallet, your coin jar, there may be something rare, something valuable, waiting to be uncovered. It doesn't take a magnate to find treasure. Sometimes it just takes a curious eye, a little patience, and a willingness to look twice at the ordinary next time you come across a dime for 1984, especially one with the Denver Mint mark. Pause for a second. Look closely. You never know if the coin in your hand is one of those few that escaped unnoticed, carrying with it a story of rarity, value, and history. Because if you're lucky enough to find one of the rare 1984 D. Roosevelt dimes with minting anomalies, strong strikes, or error characteristics, you might just be holding a piece worth anywhere from $28,000 to $76,000. And that, for a coin once worth just 10 cents, is nothing short of extraordinary. It was the fall of 2022 when a young woman named Stephanie, living in San Antonio, Texas, decided to take on a personal challenge. She wanted to see if she could pay for all of her gas for the month using only loose change she had collected over the past few years. Her grandfather had once told her that saving your coins might not make you rich, but they could surprise you someday. Little did she know, one of those coins was about to prove him absolutely right. Stephanie emptied a large mason jar on her living room floor. It clinked and clanked as hundreds of coins tumbled out. She began sorting them by denomination, placing pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters into separate containers. After an hour or so, she picked up a dime that had dulled with time but still held its original form well. She looked at the year and paused. 1976. She chuckled to herself, recognizing it as the year of America's bicentennial. She thought perhaps it was special simply because of the year. But what she didn't realize was that this dime, the 1976 Roosevelt dime, would soon be the key to unlocking a rare and surprising chapter of her life. That night, Stephanie posted a picture of the coin in a numismatic group online, just out of curiosity. She mentioned the year and casually asked if bicentennial dimes had any value. Most people reminded her that unlike the quarter and half dollar, the dime didn't receive a special bicentennial design. It was the same Roosevelt profile as always. No drums, no Independence Hall. But then, someone zoomed into the image she had posted and noticed something unusual that a collector from Pennsylvania commented, asking her to take a clearer photo under natural light, especially of the coin's edge and reverse. She followed the advice, took another photo, and uploaded it. The response this time came quickly. The user replied, "That might be a transitional planchet error. It's possible you've got something extremely rare in your hands." She was stunned. She didn't understand what a transitional planchet error even was. But intrigued, she kept reading. Other users chimed in. One person mentioned the unusual rim, the visible doubling around the word liberty, and the strange reflective luster not common in business strikes from that year. What Stephanie held wasn't just a 1976 dime. It was potentially a mint error coin worth a small fortune. She packaged the coin carefully and sent it to a well-known coin grading service. A few weeks later, she received a call that left her in shock. The grader explained that her dime had been struck on a silver planchet, which was supposed to be phased out in previous years. Dimes after 1964 were meant to be copper-nickel clad. But somehow, this one had been mistakenly struck on a leftover silver planchet, perhaps from a coin intended for proof sets. Not only that, the coin exhibited near-perfect strike characteristics with full torch lines on the reverse, showing it had been preserved in remarkable condition. Graded MS-67 with a transitional planchet error, her 1976 dime was no ordinary coin. It was an outlier, a rare survivor of an unintentional moment in minting history. But why does this matter to collectors? The Roosevelt dime has a long-standing history since it was introduced in 1946, honoring the legacy of Franklin D. Roosevelt, one of the most influential American presidents of the 20th century. Over the decades, most dimes have followed the same metal composition, but in transitional years, those that follow changes in design or materials, errors sometimes slip through. The U.S. Mint had officially switched from 90% silver to clad composition in 1965. However, during the years that followed, especially around the time special proof sets or commemorative sets were minted, silver planchets were still in circulation inside mint facilities. Occasionally, these blanks would be fed mistakenly into regular coin presses. That's what happened in this case. A 90% silver planchet was mistakenly used in 1976, a year that was historically and culturally significant. But what makes Stephanie's coin even more remarkable was its condition. Coins meant for circulation often suffer from wear, scratches, and environmental exposure. Her coin, however, had none of that. It was as if fate had preserved it for discovery, that Stephanie's story quickly made rounds in numismatic forums and blogs. Collectors began pulling out their own 1976 dimes, scrutinizing them with magnifying glasses and jeweler's loupes. Most found nothing special, but a few more examples began surfacing. Each one told its own story. One was found in an old cigar box in Ohio, another in a vending machine tray in rural Idaho. All shared the same oddities: an unmistakable silver sheen, subtle doubling, and incorrect planchet material. Experts believe fewer than 20 authentic, transitional silver planchet 1976 dimes have ever surfaced. Some reside in private collections. Others have been sold through auctions. In one case, a collector in New York paid nearly $100,000 for a pristine MS-68 example with all the right traits. It was described as one of the most intriguing Roosevelt dime errors in modern coinage. The U.S. Mint has never released an official number for these accidental silver strikes. These kinds of errors were never meant to be, and that's what makes them so coveted. In the world of coin collecting, mistakes are sometimes the most valuable attribute. They represent a moment when the system faltered, however briefly, and created something unintentionally rare. For Stephanie, the coins auction changed her life. It sold for a staggering $91,000 through a well-known numismatic auction house. She used the money to pay off her student loans, fix her aging car, and start a small online business she had always dreamed about. All because of a single dime she might have once used to buy a gumball or leave as a tip at a coffee shop. The Roosevelt dime is one of the most circulated coins in America. Millions are produced every year. To most people, a 1976 dime is nothing more than 10 cents. But in the hands of someone with curiosity and attention to detail, it can be a treasure. It's a reminder that rare value doesn't always come in big packages or shiny gold. Sometimes it's hiding in the everyday, in a dusty jar, in your glove compartment, or even in your wallet right now. So next time you get change at the store or dig through a pile of coins, take a closer look at those dimes, especially the ones from 1976. You never know what silent history they might carry or what fortune they could hold. And if you're one of the lucky few who discovers a 1976 Roosevelt dime struck on a silver planchet, in pristine condition with verified errors, you could be holding a rare piece worth anywhere from $40,000 to $106,000. Not a bad return for something most people would overlook without a second thought. It was a quiet morning in upstate New York when a retired Navy veteran named Harold Thompson sat at his kitchen table, sipping his usual black coffee and sorting through a worn-out jar of loose change. This had become a bit of a ritual ever since his wife passed away 2 years earlier. He found peace in the clink of coins, the memories tied to every nickel and dime, the whisper of history in each metallic glint. But that morning would be different. That morning, he would unknowingly stumble upon something that would alter his financial future and shock even the most seasoned coin collectors across the country. As the sun spilled through the window, Harold's fingers grasped the dime that looked no different at first glance. It had the familiar face of President Franklin D. Roosevelt staring off to the left, the standard silver-gray shine, and the bold lettering arching around the edge. But something caught his eye. The year, 1996, was struck slightly off-center. The torch on the reverse seemed unusually bold, the strike deeper than usual. Harold, having spent years collecting coins casually, felt a nudge of curiosity. He set the coin aside and finished his sorting, but the dime stayed on his mind. That evening, after dinner, he pulled out his old magnifying loupe and took a closer look. It was then that he realized the coin wasn't just misaligned. It had unusual ridges, a potential doubling in the lettering, and what looked like a faint but noticeable mint error around the torch. The words United States of America appeared slightly thicker, and the E pluribus unum motto seemed oddly spaced. There was something special here, and Harold knew it. The next morning, he carefully packaged the coin and mailed it off to a professional coin grading service he'd worked with once in the past. He didn't expect much, maybe a minor error worth a few bucks. What he didn't expect was the phone call 3 weeks later that would leave him speechless. The expert on the other end of the line sounded calm, but intrigued. "Mr. Thompson, what you've sent us is an extremely rare 1996 Roosevelt dime with a dramatic minting error. This isn't just your typical double die or misstrike. This is a high-grade specimen with a reverse die cap and full strike pressure, which makes it one of the rarest dimes from that year ever recorded." Harold was stunned. He asked what something like that might be worth, and the grader replied, "Conservatively, $40,000. Possibly more." depending on auction results. He sat in silence, gripping the receiver with disbelief. But what made the 1996 Roosevelt dime so rare? To understand that, we need to go back in time to how this coin came to be. The Roosevelt dime has been in circulation since 1946, introduced to honor the late President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who led the nation through the Great Depression and World War II. He also founded the March of Dimes, which aimed to combat polio, a disease he himself battled. The dime was selected as the denomination to carry his legacy forward, and its design remained relatively unchanged for decades. The 1996 edition was a landmark year for a few reasons. It marked the 50th anniversary of the Roosevelt dime series, and the U.S. Mint issued a special W Mint mark version produced at the West Point Mint for collector sets. However, very few people know that a small batch of 1996 dimes struck at Philadelphia and Denver ended up with unusual minting errors. Errors so subtle, yet significant, that only the most eagle-eyed collectors could spot them. These dimes had deep strike impressions, unusual die rotations, and reverse die cap errors, meaning the planchet was struck in a way that created a dramatic impression unlike anything seen before. The minting machines, working at incredibly high speeds, occasionally misaligned or malfunctioned just slightly, enough to leave behind a fingerprint of uniqueness on a handful of coins. These anomalies often go unnoticed by the public, ending up in pockets, jars, and vending machines across America. What makes a 1996 dime particularly fascinating is how few of these rare errors have been found. Experts believe fewer than 30 of these coins exist with similar features. Most are in private collections, hidden away in display cases or bank vaults. The rarity isn't just in the minting error, but also in the coin's condition. The value of such a coin depends heavily on its grade. A circulated dime with minor wear might fetch a few hundred or $1,000 if the error is prominent. But a pristine, uncirculated example with sharp detail and clean fields can reach staggering amounts at auction. One such coin, graded MS-68 with a reverse die cap error, was sold at a major numismatic auction for over $90,000, stunning collectors and dealers alike. It wasn't just the rarity, it was the story, the preservation, the mistake that made it perfect. Collectors around the world began re-examining their 1996 dimes, hoping to strike gold in their pockets. Forums lit up with images, questions, and theories. Was there a specific batch that had these errors? Were they all from Philadelphia, or did Denver contribute to the anomaly? Theories abound, but the truth remains elusive. The U.S. Mint rarely comments in detail on these small-scale mint errors unless they become a public controversy. What we do know is that Roosevelt dimes from 1996 have taken on a new life among collectors. They're no longer just common currency. They're potential treasure. Harold, the Navy veteran, ended up consigning his coin through a respected auction house. The anticipation was palpable. Bidders from around the globe registered interest. As the virtual gavel struck, the price climbed fast. $25,000, then $40,000, then $60,000. By the end of the night, the dime sold for a jaw-dropping $87,000. Harold was shocked. That little coin, tossed into a jar without a second thought, had turned into a life-changing asset. He paid off his mortgage, made a donation to the local Veterans Center, and finally booked the trip to Alaska he had always dreamed about. For him, it wasn't just a coin. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest things can hold the greatest value. Stories like Harold's have become legend in the coin-collecting community. They're the modern-day treasure tales, whispering hope to every hobbyist, every child counting pennies, every collector poring over their change. The 1996 Roosevelt dime is a testament to how something ordinary can become extraordinary, how an overlooked detail can redefine worth, and how history sometimes leaves behind a secret coated in silver. If you happen to find a 1996 dime with odd features, unusual thickness, off-center strike, doubled lettering, or any clear minting error, don't ignore it. It could be one of the very few that slipped through the cracks of the mint's precision. It could be a piece of history worth far more than 10 cents. Today, coin collectors and treasure hunters alike still keep an eye out for that elusive piece. And if you're holding one of these special 1996 Roosevelt dimes in high-grade condition with a verifiable mint error, you could be looking at a value ranging anywhere from $40,000 to $106,000. Let that sink in. One dime, one tiny, overlooked piece of metal that could change your entire world.